Genius is simply childhood recovered at will, a childhood now equipped for self-expression with mature faculties and an analytic spirit which permits him to set in order the mass of raw materials he has involuntarily accumulated. It is to this profound and joyous curiosity that one must attribute the fixed and animalistic ecstatic gaze of children confronted by the new, whatever it may be. So writes the French poet Charles Baudelaire in his essay The Painter of Modern Life. Last year, I put out a video called The Trials of Coming of Age, which got an incredible reception from you all. I basically argued that the Neo Egoist League represents a rite of initiation, as it were, for the Blue Lock cast. The arc is their coming of age, where they transition from amateurs to professional footballers. And this aspect of the arc is underpinned by having each of its major players struggle to progress from childhood to the world of adults. That video was written before the PXG match had concluded, and as such, I did not really touch on how these ideas come to a head in the journey of our protagonist Yoichi Isagi. So that's what I want to address in this video. If you haven't seen the previous part of this analysis, I would highly recommend checking that out first. I'll still be here after you watched it. Hello, my name is Sean, and this is really just an appetizer for what will be most likely the longest Blue Lock analysis that I've ever made, and that'll be out in about 2 weeks' time. Also, major shout out to all my backers on Patreon who have been supporting me during my YouTube hiatus the past few months. You're absolute legends, all of you. So, to make sense of Isagi's developments in the NEL, we first need to go back to the very start of the arc. When Yoichi Isagi enters the German stratum, he experiences one of the most mind-blowing reveals in the entire series. He's standing face to face with Noel Noa, the world's greatest striker and Isagi's childhood hero. And this is something I brought up already in the first video, but it's worth reiterating here as well. During his very first introduction as Master of Bastard München, Noa is characterized as a strict father figure, a domineering patriarch who chastises naughty children and doesn't allow anyone to challenge his absolute authority. In other words, Noa enforces a hierarchy between himself and his players that is analogous to that of a, let's say, traditional authoritative father figure to that of his children. That brings us to Noa's dynamic with Isagi in particular. For you see, Noa is not the only one who conceives of their relationship as one of adult and child. After all, it has been established from Blue Lock's very first chapter that Isagi grew up idolizing Noa and started playing football to follow in his hero's footsteps. In fact, this is highlighted again when Isagi first enters the field under Noa's tutelage. We are shown another flashback of Isagi as a child, watching the world's best striker from afar. Now, Isagi vows to spend every second of the match analysing the field, the very lesson that Noa had drilled into him previously, by the way. But then, the moment he's called onto the field, he treats this as the realization of his childhood dream to play with Noa, rather than as an opportunity to learn and grow in this world-class environment. To put it differently, Isagi in the Barca match is stuck in the role of a mesmerized child so long as Noa remains on the field because he can't conceive of anyone greater than the player he positively worships. Looking back at the conversation between master and pupil before the match, Isagi's main issue actually wasn't his ability to describe the ideal he aspires to. Rather, the cause of his mental block appears to be the figure of Noa himself. Isagi can't even imagine himself surpassing the current number 1 because he has placed Noa on an unassailable pedestal, to the point that he needs an intermediary in the form of Kaiser to even approximate his image of the world's best. In the Barcha match in particular, Isagi only becomes halfway effective once Noa leaves the field, once he's no longer under the spell of the player he adores. So let's flash forward 100 chapters to the final match of the NEL. But before discussing Isagi, we have to look at another major character in the PXG match, Alexis Ness. I touched on Ness in the previous video. He's one of the many manifestations of players who are locked into an eternal childhood through his obsessive belief in magic and fairy tales. However, there's an even more pressing issue that becomes ever more apparent as the arc unfolds. Ness's increasingly delusional adoration of Michael Kaiser. Perhaps the greatest example of this comes at the tail end of his backstory. Ness reiterates his belief that football is magic against the backdrop of Kaiser choking himself. And just look at his dopey smile when Kaiser announces that he has discovered a weapon to defeat Isagi once and for all. It's as if Ness has completely erased the sight of Kaiser's auto-mutilation from his memory the moment that his partner said that all was good, fully buying into Kaiser's narrative rather than the reality before his eyes. And even after Kaiser explicitly casts him aside not once but twice, Ness remains in exclusive service to Bastard Superstar. That is, up to the very end of the match, where Ness realizes that he can't satisfy Kaiser as he is, and for the first time challenges his former master. And this is of course the sequence that leads up to the winning goal of the PXG match. Let me put it differently. Ness's character journey revolves around learning that he can't get what he truly desires through blind loyalty and obedience to his idol. And so, his final moment in the NEL sees Ness rejecting Kaiser's most deep-held belief and asserting himself as an equal in their relationship. So, why is Ness the one of all characters to effectively crown Isagi as the winner of the NEL? It's because both of them effectively undergo the exact same development over the course of the PXG match. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that Ness represents an exaggerated version of Isagi's greatest flaw in the arc. Just think about it. When Isagi first takes the field together with Noa, he reduces himself to a child gawking at his hero. And so, it's very telling that his German counterpart in this regard is the literal embodiment of childish fantasies. So, let me turn to Isagi's own coming of age, which is preceded by basically a death of innocence. For me, the final stretch of the PXG match is the greatest bit of Isagi writing in the series. The confrontations with Loki and Rin challenge his entire sense of self, and right when he experiences this crisis of faith, Noa pulls away the veil and reveals that he was only interested in Isagi's bitter enemy all along. As it turns out, he simply used the Blue Locker as a tool for his own selfish purposes. In other words, once Isagi uncovers the sinister depths of Noa's ego, he discovers that his naive, idealized image of the world's greatest striker had never conformed with reality. Kinda just like how Ness's idea of Kaiser never conformed to reality there either. And watch what happens in the match right after Noa reveals his true colors. Bastard's master is dragged to the ground, figurizing how he has fallen off the pedestal that Isagi had erected for him all this time. Now, let's take a step back here. What Isagi has just experienced is a quintessential part of growing up isn't it? Most children live under the assumption that their parents and the other adults around them know what's best and look out for them, and you go through life trusting them unconditionally. But as you grow older, you come to understand that nobody holds all the answers, that our former authority figures are flawed, imperfect human beings like everyone else. Even the world's greatest striker isn't some larger-than-life superhero. He's more like a football crackhead, forever craving his next hit. And so, the sequence where Isagi recalibrates his entire worldview and comes to a newfound understanding of how he can coexist with and surpass the world's greatest players culminates with him challenging the authority of his former idol. This is no longer a child blindly worshipping his hero, but a young man carving out a space for himself in the world of professional football. Now, there's a further figure who's relevant to Isagi's big coming-of-age experience, which is Julien Loki. Now note, the very first thing we learn about Loki is his age, with Isagi explicitly drawing a comparison between the two of them because they are age mates. And as the manga unfolds, it plays up the difference in stature between the two ever more. Loki is one of the master strikers, but Isagi just an amateur struggling to even make the starting lineup. More than anyone else in the series, the French striker underscores the liminal life station of Blue Lock's teenagers. They're not quite children anymore, but on the cusp of adulthood, with the world of professionals being just within their grasp. That's also why Loki is the one to trigger Isagi's existential crisis. His accomplishments are the living proof of what someone at their age can achieve, and once you've completed the rite of passage, shutting down the uninitiated becomes mere child's play. This is why the culmination of Isagi's arc in the NEL coincides with his first ever victory over Loki. His figurative coming of age is represented by him finally standing on equal footing with his peer who had already passed the trial. So that's the gist of Isagi's growth in a PXG match. However, this is not the full story of Isagi's coming of age. I set out in the previous video that the message of the NEL is not that attaining maturity means leaving behind your childish ways and conforming to the strictures of adult society. Rather, the arc shows us time and again that a world-class footballer can only grow up by staying true to their inner child. So for Isagi, his story can't end in disillusionment with the people he admired. He's only undergone one half of the process so far. So that brings me to chapter 304, which is my favorite chapter since the end of the NEL. I have to start with its very title, Benefactor of My Dream, because there's a lot going on here. Firstly, the most overt interpretation. After coming home, Isagi receives a mysterious box from Jinpachi Ego with a tailor-made training regiment. This prompts his parents to inquire about what kind of person Blue Lock's mastermind is, and Isagi responds by saying that he's the benefactor of his dream. But here, it's very telling how Isagi characterizes Ego. Ego is trustworthy because of his unsociable, single-minded nature, and because he lives his life according to his desires, which taught Isagi the sincerity of an adult. So, why does Isagi make such a big deal of Ego being trustworthy? It's of course because his first taste of adulthood involved being stabbed in the back by his childhood hero. And in that light, he had to reevaluate which of the grown-ups around him can be trusted. And that brings us full circle to Isagi's origin as a footballer. Once more, we see Isagi mesmerized behind the television, with the spread explicitly calling back to the days where he would marvel at Noah behind the screen. This is the moment that truly encapsulates how Ego facilitates Isagi's dream. He reignites Isagi's childish excitement by expanding his horizons and showing him just how much is still left for him to discover. Ego granted Isagi a ticket into the world at large, both figuratively and very literally, and so our protagonist can take his first strides into this new frontier. Paradoxically, it's exactly by leaving the world of his childhood behind that he can reinvigorate his childlike sense of wonder. In fact, Ego has set out his beliefs about parenting all the way back in the second selection. Here, the football maverick staunchly declares that children should travel, that they should be exposed to the world at large. Otherwise, they're at risk of turning into closed-minded adults like the heads of the Japanese Football Union. By implication, Japanese football has stagnated because of its insularity. That's a key lesson of the NEL, where being exposed to the world at large and being exposed to new ideas go hand in hand. And so, the arc concludes with Isagi finally voyaging into this brave new world in earnest. Also, I can't help but notice a striking visual callback with Isagi's suitcase. To me, it immediately recalled the one Sai had when he made the exact same voyage to Spain and ultimately transformed into the symbol of the baggage that Sai brought back with him after seeing his dreams crushed by the world at large. In that light, Isagi's journey to Spain is a new trial in its own right. It's to see if he, unlike his predecessor, has been raised into an adult who can handle everything the world will throw at him, with the U20 World Cup right around the corner. Yet, this is only one half of what is highlighted in chapter 304, because the other focal point is our protagonist's relationship with his parents. Let me hone in on one detail I really like in this context. Isagi's father imitating his son's moment of reckoning against Michael Kaiser. So why is the manga recalling Kaiser in this particular moment? In my view, it's because the key behind Kaiser's every action is his childhood trauma at the hands of an abusive, unloving father. So by evoking Kaiser at this specific moment, the manga posits the core between the two strikers. The love they have received from their parents or lack thereof. I have to confess that I've always had a soft spot for coming-of-age narratives, and as such, I really love this angle as a heuristic framework for the NEL and arguably Blue Lock as a whole. And among all the different iterations of stories about children struggling to become fully fledged adults, this is to me the most beautiful manifestation of them all. In the interaction between Isagi and his father, the manga suggests that we're almost witnessing a reversal of roles. The son has matured and is ready to take the place of his father. The rite of passage has been completed. But then we get the final part of Isagi's coming of age. His parents acknowledge all the difficulties that he'll face upon entering the adult world, and so they offer him the guarantee that there will always be a place for him to return home, that he can safely become an adult because there's a space where he will always remain a child. At this point, let me briefly turn back to chapter 152, where Isagi returns home for the first time after entering Blue Lock. It's here that Isagi's parents express their greatest wish for their son, that he lives the way he wants to live. And from this unconditional support, Isagi makes an unabashed declaration that he'll become the world's greatest striker. In other words, right before the NEL commences, the manga already couples Isagi's ability to face off against the entire world to the love he receives from his parents. So, here's my question to you all. Who is truly the eponymous benefactor of Isagi's dream in chapter 304? In my view, the answer is far from obvious. Also, one more thing. I really don't have the space to go over the entire Nagi and Rail storyline here, but I noted in the previous video that Nagi back in Manshine was also described as a chick who is being raised by Prince and Agi, as one more manifestation of this coming-of-age storytelling. However, flip forward to the end of the arc and the duo is characterized by their failure to grow up. Egil chastises Reo for treating Blue Lock like school rather than the adult world. Nagi, meanwhile, admits that his reliance on Reo was like a child relying on, presumably, the adults around them, and that his dream was too childish to remain in Blue Lock. Where everyone else grew up, he alone failed to reach maturity. And so, Nagi is literally sent back to school, returning to the world of children rather than entering his next stage of life. That's all for me for now. I know it's been quite a while since the last video. In case you missed it, I spent the last few months revising my PhD thesis, and I have now submitted the manuscripts of the book to the publisher. From now onwards though, I'll be back with regular Blue Lock analyses. So, everyone, thanks so much for all your patience. I really consider myself fortunate to have so many benefactors of my own dreams. For one, Gabriel Lewis with his indispensable help with the editing process. And then there's everyone who's been signed up to my €10 Patreon over the past few months. Bunroon, Jesus Cujo, Local Sassboy, McG Cave, Melody, Orangey Legend, Patrician Pats. Thanks so much for all your support. It's been a massive help handling some recent equipment related expenses and commissioning new artwork. And as said, I've got a major project coming out in 2 weeks' time, and I hope you're as excited for that as I am. So, until next time, Slán go fóill.